My daughter-in-law called me a pig at my son's wedding. What they found out next sent shivers down their spine. It was supposed to be a celebration. Champagne, laughter, and love, until the bride called her new mother-in-law a pig. What no one knew was that the real celebration hadn't even begun, and she was the one holding the invitation. It was supposed to be a celebration. Welcome back, my family. Before we begin, I want to take a moment for anyone who's ever been betrayed, dismissed, or made to feel small. May you find strength without losing your softness. May justice find you without hardening your heart. And may every tear you've cried in silence become wisdom, not bitterness. This space is for healing, truth, and growth. If this speaks to you, tell me in the comments, what lesson did pain teach you? The ballroom shimmered with gold, laughter echoing beneath the crystal chandeliers. It was supposed to be the proudest day of Margaret Thompson's life, the day her only son, Bradley, married the woman he said was his forever. Dressed in a deep emerald gown that hugged her regal posture, Margaret moved through the crowd with quiet grace, greeting guests, smiling through the exhaustion that came from planning a wedding that had cost her nearly everything. The air was thick with perfume and champagne bubbles when the band quieted and a microphone clicked. Sophia Whitmore, radiant in white and diamonds, lifted her glass. "To love," she began, her smile sweet and sharp. "And to family, even the ones who made the planning process interesting." The crowd chuckled. Margaret tilted her head, sensing something behind the bride's polished grin. Then Sophia's next words sliced through the laughter like glass. "Everyone, meet the pig we had to put up with." Gasps rippled across the room. Champagne froze midair. Someone coughed to break the silence. Sophia giggled, clearly proud of her own joke. Cameras flashed, capturing the stunned expression on Margaret's face. Poised, silent, every muscle in her jaw working to keep her dignity intact. In that brief, terrible moment, Margaret heard every insult she'd ever ignored, every microaggression dressed as humor. But she refused to flinch. The older white guests glanced at each other in awkward sympathy, while others whispered, pretending not to stare. Sophia's father, James Whitmore, looked horrified. His drink slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. He turned toward his daughter, then toward Margaret, his face draining of color. He started, voice trembling. Margaret met his eyes with calm precision. "Yes," she said softly. "I'll see you Monday morning." The crowd stilled again. Sophia blinked, confused. The band fumbled for a tune that wouldn't come. Margaret lifted her glass, her hand steady as stone, and spoke loud enough for every whisper to die. "To family," she said, her voice smooth, measured, devastatingly calm. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Sophia tried to laugh it off, but the tension didn't break. James stared into his empty glass, realizing too late what his daughter had done. Margaret turned away, her face unreadable. The chandeliers shimmered above her like judgment. She found her seat, back straight, eyes dry. The insult burned in her chest, but beneath it, something else sparked, a cold, focused fire that didn't crave revenge, only resolution. When the night finally ended, Margaret walked out into the parking lot, the noise of laughter fading behind her. The air was sharp with autumn wind. She slipped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, whispering a single line to herself, so softly it was almost a prayer. "They will remember this night," she said, "but not for the reason they think." As her driver pulled away from the glowing hotel, the reflection of the ballroom lights blurred across the car window. Behind her, the music swelled again, muffled by distance, a celebration that had already soured. Margaret didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply sat there, her face illuminated by the city lights, the image of her son's bride laughing replaying in her mind. But under that memory, another surfaced, The signature she'd just placed on a document that very morning. The one that named her the new chief executive officer of Whitmore Enterprises. She smiled faintly, not out of joy, but control. Monday was only 2 days away. The morning light slanted through the blinds, slicing across the emerald gown still hanging from Margaret's closet. She stared at it while sipping her coffee, the same gown she'd worn when her world shifted. Every sparkle on that dress now felt like a spark of fury she refused to let die. Her phone buzzed non-stop on the kitchen counter. Missed calls. Messages from numbers she didn't recognize. One voicemail from James Whitmore himself, his voice brittle beneath forced politeness. Margaret, I think we should discuss the incident. It was a misunderstanding. Please, call me back. She pressed delete without hesitation. Across the kitchen table sat a laptop, open to a spreadsheet of merger documents. The Whitmore acquisition, finalized last quarter, now officially under her control. Her cursor hovered over a clause that would give her full voting rights. She smiled faintly, clicked confirm, and whispered, "Let's make sure Monday hurts." A notification pinged in the corner of her screen. A message from Jade, her assistant. "You should see this." Attached was a link to a TikTok clip from the wedding. Sophia's voice blared through the speakers. "Everyone, meet the pig we had to put up with." The video already had 53,000 views. Comments flooded in. "OMG, that poor woman. Who humiliates their mother-in-law like that? She's done for." Margaret closed the laptop, her face calm but her pulse quickening. The internet had done her a favor. Sophia had publicly burned her own reputation before Monday even arrived. She walked to the living room and paused by a framed photo, the lake house she'd mortgaged to pay for the wedding. Her reflection overlapped with it in the glass, and the memory bled in for only a moment. An investor once calling her a diversity hire, the sting of being asked to fetch coffee in her own meeting. That was the last time she'd let anyone reduce her. The phone buzzed again. This time a text from Bradley. "Love you, Mom. Sophia's mortified about last night. Don't be mad, okay?" Margaret stared at the words. Unreadable. She typed slowly, "I'm fine. Tell her I'll see her soon." She didn't add, "at work." Setting the phone down, she turned toward her office, grabbed a slim black folder, and slid inside the finalized CEO contract. Signed, sealed, ready for the press release. Out the window, the Whitmore building gleamed like a mirror, catching the morning light. In its reflection, she saw not just herself, but the boardroom she'd walk into, the looks she'd receive, the apology Sophia would never forget. She picked up the emerald gown from its hanger and draped it over her arm. "You and I," she said softly, "have unfinished business." The sound of church bells carried faintly from the city below. It was Sunday. Tomorrow, she would take her place at the head of the table. And by the time anyone understood what was happening, it would already be too late. The Chicago's skyline pulsed with nervous energy, as if the city itself sensed a reckoning coming. Inside her penthouse office, Margaret Thompson sat before her laptop, the glow of spreadsheets flickering across her calm, unshakable face. Rows of data reflected the empire she had quietly built. Subsidiaries, shell holdings, voting shares, every percentage point a weapon. What had started as protection for her late husband's legacy had become something far sharper. Her phone buzzed. Voicemail number 4 from James Whitmore. "Margaret, please. Sophia's in tears. Let's fix this privately. You don't need to bring the company into personal matters." Margaret smiled thinly and hit delete. Then another buzz. This time, a text. From Bradley. "Mom, I talked to Sophia. She knows she went too far. Please, don't make this worse for her. She's my wife now. You've always taught me to forgive. And whatever's going on with her family's business, just don't do something you'll regret." Her hand tightened around the phone. "Don't do something you'll regret." He had no idea how long she'd already regretted everything she'd done for him. A news alert blinked across her laptop. Viral wedding toast sparks online outrage. Bride calls groom's mother a pig. Sophia's smiling face filled the thumbnail. Glass raised, mid-laugh. Margaret clicked it open. In the comments section, strangers were tearing Sophia apart. #wedding from hell was trending. "Let the internet do the warm-up," Margaret murmured. "I'll handle the finale." Downstairs, thunder cracked over Lake Michigan. She crossed to her bookshelf and pulled out a photo frame, her and Bradley on his graduation day. The pride in his young face used to fill her with joy. Now it ached. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Mrs. Thompson?" It was Patricia Whitmore's voice, quivering under forced politeness. "I just wanted to say, we're all very sorry. You'll see Sophia's apology online soon. Perhaps we can start fresh." Margaret's reply was cool and measured. "Fresh starts require clean hands, Mrs. Whitmore. Tell your daughter to wash hers." When she hung up, she slipped a single document into her leather briefcase. Crisp, white, and final. The title, bold across the top, gleamed in the lamplight. Press release. Confidential until 9 a.m. Monday. Margaret Thompson appointed Chief Executive Officer, Whitmore Enterprises. She closed the case and fastened the clasp with a click that echoed like a trigger pull. Before turning off the light, she played the wedding video once more. The frozen frame of Sophia's smirk, champagne glass in hand. "See you at work," she whispered. Then she looked down at her briefcase. The power shift was already written, waiting only for daylight. If you had one chance to make the people who disrespected you answer for it, would you take it or walk away? If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. Your support brings us closer to our 1K subscriber milestone and inspires us to keep creating more emotional stories of resilience and healing. Thank you for being part of our journey. Your presence matters more than you know. Monday morning dawned cold and metallic, the kind of gray that made Chicago look carved from steel. Traffic hissed through the wet streets as Margaret Thompson's town car rolled toward the Whitmore Enterprises Tower, a building that once turned her away because she didn't fit their brand image. Inside the car, Margaret's reflection stared back from the tinted glass. Calm, regal, unreadable. The briefcase rested beside her like a silent accomplice. In 20 minutes, the world would know exactly who ran Whitmore Enterprises. At 8:42 a.m., the car stopped beneath the marble awning. A valet in a navy coat reached for her door, uncertain whether to address her as Ms. or Ma'am. She stepped out before he decided, heels striking the pavement like punctuation marks. The lobby. Employees whispered as she passed through security. Some recognized her from the viral video. Others only saw the poised woman striding toward the executive elevator. On the 25th floor, a flustered receptionist stammered, Mrs. Thompson, the board is already gathered. Mr. Whitmore called an emergency meeting." "I know," she said smoothly. "He's right on time for it." The boardroom. Inside, the atmosphere was funeral thick. James Whitmore stood at the head of the long glass table, his wife Patricia beside him, face powdered and trembling. Sophia sat near the end, no jewelry, no confidence, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles blanched. When Margaret entered, silence swept the room. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. James forced a smile. "Mrs. Thompson, glad you could join us. We're here to discuss a rather confusing document that circulated this morning." Margaret placed her briefcase on the table, opened it, and slid a folder toward him. "The confusion," she said, "comes from the fact that it's not a rumor." He flipped the first page. The press release headline stared back at him. Margaret Thompson appointed Chief Executive Officer, Whitmore Enterprises. The color drained from his face. You can't just, this is a family-owned company. It was, Margaret replied. Until your family leveraged 48% of your shares last quarter to finance those failing retail projects. The fund that bought them. Mine. Gasps rippled through the boardroom. Patricia clutched her pearls. Sophia's lips parted in shock. Margaret continued, voice steady and deliberate. For weeks, your board has been operating under the assumption you'd recover. You didn't. Your father's legacy deserved better than mismanagement and entitlement. James slammed a hand on the table. You planned this, out of spite. Margaret leaned forward, eyes locking on his. No, Mr. Whitmore. Out of strategy. The difference is discipline. An assistant burst through the door holding a tablet. Sir, the press release just went live. CNBC's already calling for comment. Margaret gestured to the screen behind her. A news alert scrolled across it. Breaking. Real estate veteran Margaret Thompson takes control of Whitmore Enterprises after quiet buyout. Below it, social media feeds exploded. Side-by-side images of the wedding toast and the press headline, captioned, The Ultimate Revenge Arc. Sophia buried her face in her hands. Patricia whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Margaret addressed the room. Effective immediately, all senior staff will report to me. Operational audits begin today. Anyone wishing to resign may do so before noon. James staggered backward. You'll ruin everything. Hundreds of employees. No, she interrupted. I'll protect them. From you. The sun arrives. The boardroom door opened again. Bradley stood there, suit rumpled, eyes red. Mom, please. Don't do this. The room froze. Patricia looked relieved, as if he might save them. Margaret didn't move. This is business, Bradley. It's vengeance. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're proving them right, that you're controlling, that you always need power. She studied him for a long moment, sadness flickering beneath her composure. Power doesn't corrupt character, Bradley. It reveals it. Today we're seeing everyone's. He looked at Sophia. She couldn't meet his gaze. Richard Patterson, Margaret's attorney, entered and handed her a fresh folder. Signed confirmations from the shareholders. You're officially recognized as CEO. James sagged into a chair. Patricia muttered, We'll sue. You're welcome to, Richard replied dryly. You'll lose. Margaret gathered the folders into her briefcase. Her voice softened, not gloating, simply final. I didn't take your company to destroy you. I took it because you forgot what respect looks like. Now you'll learn, in the one language you understand, accountability. She turned to Bradley one last time. You wanted independence. You have it. Use it to rebuild something honest. Then to Sophia, who sat trembling. Choose who you are without anyone's permission. That's the only freedom worth keeping. As she left, cameras from the waiting press flashed through the glass doors. Chicago's sunlight poured in, catching the silver streaks in her hair like a crown. Behind her, the Whitmore's empire cracked under its own weight. Ahead of her, a new chapter waited, cold, clear, and entirely hers. If you were Margaret standing in that boardroom, would you show mercy or let every consequence fall? The headlines hit before lunch. Wedding scandal turns corporate coup. From humiliation to CEO, Margaret Thompson's rise. Hashtag Karma Queen trended for 8 straight hours. By the time Margaret's car pulled into her garage that afternoon, the world had already decided what kind of woman she was. half applauding, half condemning. She turned off the engine and sat in silence, the echo of flashbulbs still flaring in her mind. The house felt too quiet. No celebratory champagne, no phone calls of congratulations. Only the rhythmic tick of the kitchen clock and the low hum of the refrigerator. Victory, it turned out, was loud on the outside and hollow on the inside. Her phone lit up with messages. Jade, board compliance reports incoming. You've got 3 resignations already. Investor thread, stock up 12%. Congrats, boss. And then one from an unknown number. No text, just a video link. She hesitated, then pressed play. It was Bradley. His face filled the frame, voice strained. Mom, you won. Okay. You proved your point. But Sophia's a wreck. The internet's tearing her apart. She hasn't left our apartment since the press release. I get it. She hurt you. But now, you're hurting her back in front of millions. He exhaled shakily. Dad would have hated this. The words landed like glass breaking. Margaret's breath hitched. For the first time in 2 days, she felt the weight beneath the power. She turned off the video before he could finish. By Tuesday morning, reporters camped outside her office lobby. A news van blocked the entrance. Margaret Thompson, a journalist shouted. Was the wedding humiliation motivation for the hostile takeover? She gave no comment, walking briskly past the cameras. Inside, Jade intercepted her with a tablet. You should see this. A trending clip showed Sophia crying on a talk show couch beside Patricia Whitmore's tight-lipped sympathy. I made a mistake, Sophia said between tears. But to destroy an entire family over it? That's cruelty, not justice. The clip had 1 million views in 4 hours. Comments split like a knife. Hashtag Team Margaret versus hashtag Team Sophia. Jade frowned. You're becoming the villain in their edit. Margaret stared at the screen. I was never their hero. Still, the comment section's venom cut deeper than she'd admit. She waited to humiliate a young woman in public. Petty revenge. She turned away. The private visit. That evening, Bradley appeared at her door. No warning, just the sound of the lock turning and his quiet voice calling, Mom! She found him in the living room, looking older than his years. Why didn't you tell me, he asked. About the merger, the shares, everything. Because you'd have stopped me. You're right, he said. Because you don't fix humiliation with humiliation. She poured 2 glasses of water and handed him one. She called me a pig, Bradley. At your wedding. Do you know what that meant to me, in front of those people? I've spent decades proving I belonged in rooms that looked just like that. And you stood there and did nothing. My own son. I know. He hesitated. But you taught me that dignity doesn't need witnesses. Her eyes softened, but her tone stayed measured. Dignity doesn't erase damage. And neither does silence. He sank into the couch, head in his hands. I just wanted both of you to be happy. Now I've lost you both. The words cracked something in her chest she didn't know was still breakable. The mirror moment. After he left, Margaret walked into her office and stared at her reflection in the glass window. For a moment, she saw not the CEO, not the woman who'd out-strategized an empire, just a mother who'd been called less than human and answered by becoming untouchable. Her phone buzzed again. This time from Jade. Press requests non-stop. Want to issue a statement. She typed back, no statement. Let them talk. Then deleted it and rewrote, draft something. Not about revenge. About resilience. She stared at the blinking cursor for a long time before sending it. The closing image. Midnight. Rain smeared the city lights outside her window. Margaret opened her briefcase one last time and looked at the press release that had changed everything. She traced her signature at the bottom, then folded the paper carefully and placed it in a drawer, next to her late husband's old photo. Her eyes glistened. "Maybe this isn't the ending," she whispered. "Maybe it's the consequence." Outside, thunder rolled again, the same sound that had carried her through the plan. Only now, it didn't sound like triumph. It sounded like truth. Do you think Margaret went too far, or was she finally standing up for herself in the only way the world would notice? By Wednesday morning, the internet had turned the story into a spectacle. Podcasts dissected the pig toast scandal, business analysts called it a case study in emotional leadership, and social media split into sides like a digital courtroom. Margaret Thompson sat in her corner office, the skyline stretching beyond the glass walls, phone vibrating non-stop. She didn't even look at it anymore. The television across the room showed Sophia again, this time on Good Morning America, makeup soft, voice trembling just enough to win sympathy. "I made a terrible mistake," Sophia said, dabbing her eyes. "I was nervous, overwhelmed. I said something cruel. But Margaret's retaliation wasn't professional. It was personal. I just hope one day she can forgive me." The interviewer nodded gravely. "Do you think she's abusing her power?" "I think," Sophia said, pausing, "she's showing the world that forgiveness isn't profitable." The studio audience murmured in empathy. A producer switched to a side-by-side image. Margaret at the boardroom table, Sophia crying on set. The narrative had flipped again. Margaret's chest tightened. For a moment, she felt the sting of being the villain in someone else's story all over again. The backlash deepens. By noon, her assistant Jade walked in, face pale. "Ma'am, we're losing sponsors. 2 real estate partners want to reevaluate their association. The PR team says you need a softer image, something human, maybe an interview." Margaret leaned back in her chair. "Human? They want me to smile while they erase what happened." Jade hesitated. "If you don't, they'll write the ending for you." For the first time, Margaret didn't have an answer. She looked down at the wedding photo on her desk, Bradley and Sophia, glowing with youth and love. Her hand trembled as she turned it face down. The offer. That evening, Bradley arrived unannounced again, but this time, he wasn't pleading. He carried a manila envelope. "Mom, Sophia wants to meet. Off camera. Just you two." Margaret gave him a long look. "Why now?" "She says she wants to apologize properly. No cameras, no social media. Just peace." Margaret didn't trust it, but she saw the desperation in her son's eyes. "Where?" "The garden at the hotel. Tomorrow morning." She exhaled slowly. "All right, but if it's another performance." "It's not," he said quickly. "She just wants to make it right." He turned to leave, but before the door closed, she called softly, "Bradley." He looked back. "You look just like your father when you try to fix the unfixable." The night before. That night, sleep refused her. She sat on the balcony, the city lights shimmering below like broken promises. Her phone buzzed, another notification. A viral hashtag, #ForgiveSophia. She scrolled through thousands of comments urging her to be the bigger person. One caught her eye. "Power without grace is just another form of cruelty." She stared at it for a long moment, then set the phone down. Her reflection in the glass looked tired, almost fragile. She whispered to the night, "I didn't start this war. But maybe I don't need to keep fighting it." For the first time since the wedding, her shoulders softened. Not surrender, just release. The morning meeting. The next morning, the hotel garden shimmered with frost. Sophia was already there, dressed simply, hands clasped. Cameras nowhere in sight. Margaret approached slowly. Sophia spoke first, voice trembling. "I said something unforgivable, and you destroyed my family's company for it. But I deserved some of it. Maybe not all, but some." Margaret studied her. "You think what I did was revenge?" Sophia nodded. "Wasn't it?" Margaret shook her head. "It was a mirror. You wanted the world to laugh at me. Instead, they saw themselves." Sophia swallowed hard. "Then what now?" Margaret looked past her to the skyline. "Now, we find out who you are when no one's watching." She turned to leave, but paused, just long enough to add, "Don't waste your second chance pretending to be sorry. Use it to become someone different." Sophia's eyes filled with tears that looked real this time. "I will." The silent shift. Back in her car, Margaret checked her phone. A message from Jade awaited her. Public opinions shifting again. "People are calling your meeting with Sophia a masterclass in grace. Stock steady. You did good, boss." Margaret smiled faintly, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. She looked out the window at the frozen city, where her reflection ghosted over the glass towers she now ruled. She'd won every battle. But peace, real peace, still sat just out of reach. Do you think forgiveness is a sign of strength, or does it let people escape the consequences they earned? By Friday, the quiet of Margaret's office felt dangerous. The headlines that once glorified her as a symbol of poetic justice now carried doubt. Was the CEO's power move too personal? Whitmore legacy shattered. Can Thompson lead through scandal? Margaret stood by the window, coffee untouched. The skyline that had once mirrored victory now shimmered with unease. Her assistant Jade entered, holding a folder and a worried look. "Another emergency board meeting. They're calling for accountability, Margaret. The investors love the numbers, but they hate the story." Margaret turned slowly. "Then let's give them a new one." The boardroom again. The same boardroom where she'd claimed her crown now felt colder. Every seat was filled. Cameras weren't allowed this time, only judgment. James Whitmore sat across from her, forced to attend as a minority shareholder. His expression was calm now, too calm. Patricia was there as well, silent, brittle as glass. The chairman cleared his throat. "Mrs. Thompson, the public controversy has cost us major partnerships. The brand's integrity is questioned. We believe it's time for you to step aside, temporarily, of course." Margaret folded her hands. "For what reason? I haven't violated a single corporate code." James spoke, voice oily smooth. "For perception, Margaret. Optics. You've turned this company into a spectacle. Forgive the wordplay, but your personal revenge has made us all pigs in the mud." A few board members snickered. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Do you know what I see? Men afraid of the kind of woman they can't control with reputation threats." Silence fell. One of the younger executives, a woman in her 30s, spoke hesitantly. "Maybe there's a middle ground, Mrs. Thompson. A press campaign, something to soften your image." Margaret's gaze softened slightly. "I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to lead." Still, she saw it, the hesitation in the room, the cracks forming beneath her feet. The private collapse. Hours later, she shut herself in her office, the city lights cutting through the blinds like sharp blades. Jade entered quietly. "The PR team says they can't contain the narrative anymore. Sophia's story has sympathy. The Whitmores are fundraising for family restoration. People are calling her brave." Margaret almost laughed, bitter and low. Brave for what? Surviving her own cruelty. Jade hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe they just like stories where the woman cries instead of conquers." Margaret looked up, eyes wet but fierce. "Then they'll never understand me." Her phone buzzed again. "Bradley." "This time," she answered. The son's plea. "Mom," his voice cracked through the line. "They're saying you might lose the board vote." "I might," she said evenly. "But I'll walk out with my dignity. Can't you just step back? Issue a statement? Say you're sorry?" Margaret's silence stretched. "I'm not sorry for standing up for myself, Bradley. But maybe I'm sorry for how it feels to you." He sighed, defeated. Sophia's pregnant. The air left her lungs. Her grip on the phone tightened. "What?" "She found out 2 days ago. She didn't want to tell you like this." Margaret's voice softened, trembling slightly. "Then stop fighting me, Bradley. Go take care of your family." He hesitated. "You're part of that family too, Mom, whether you believe it or not." The line went dead. The turning point. She sat in the stillness, staring at the skyline. A life spent earning respect had left no room for peace. And now, the empire she'd built was demanding a sacrifice, her pride or her power. Jade stepped back into the room. "The board votes tomorrow. Do you want me to draft your defense speech?" Margaret's eyes lifted slowly. "No. Draft a statement instead. One that tells the truth." "What truth?" "That power without compassion is hollow. And that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's evolution." Jade nodded, eyes wide. "You're really doing this?" Margaret exhaled. "It's time to show them leadership isn't revenge. It's redemption." The final scene. Late that night, Margaret returned to her office balcony. Below, cameras still swarmed the lobby. Reporters, lights, noise. She looked down at them one last time, then up at the stars barely visible through the haze. In her reflection on the glass, she didn't see the woman from the wedding, nor the one who'd walked into the boardroom with vengeance burning in her chest. She saw a survivor finally deciding what kind of legacy she wanted to leave behind. And for the first time since this began, Margaret smiled. Not for the cameras, not for the victory, but for the quiet possibility that tomorrow might be about healing instead of war. Would you give up your power to find peace, or keep fighting to prove you were right? Morning sunlight spilled across the marble floors of Whitmore Enterprises, turning every reflection into a reminder of what was at stake. The boardroom doors loomed open, cameras barred, tension thick enough to taste. Margaret Thompson walked in wearing charcoal gray. No color, no armor, no statement. Just truth. Her assistant Jade followed a step behind, clutching a folder containing the statement Margaret had written overnight. Every seat was filled again. The entire board, James and Patricia Whitmore, legal counsel, and a few journalists allowed in for transparency. This wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was Judgment Day. The vote begins. The chairman stood. Today's motion concerns the temporary removal of Margaret Thompson as CEO of Whitmore Enterprises, citing reputational damage and leadership concerns. Mrs. Thompson, you have the floor. Margaret nodded once, rose from her seat, and stepped forward. For a moment, she said nothing. Just looked at the faces around her, the same ones that once dismissed her, applauded her, and now waited for her downfall. Then she began. The speech. "I came to this company believing that success would protect me. That money, titles, and results would drown out the whispers that said I didn't belong here." Her voice was calm, unflinching. "When someone called me a pig at my own son's wedding, I thought silence was grace. But grace doesn't mean letting people strip you of humanity. So, I fought back the only way I knew how, with strategy. With control." A murmur ran through the room. She didn't flinch. But control without compassion turns victory into poison. Somewhere between the humiliation and the headlines, I became the very thing I swore I'd never be: cold, untouchable, and alone. She paused, letting the words breathe. I won't apologize for taking my place. But I will apologize for mistaking vengeance for justice. For showing my son that power matters more than peace. The silence grew deeper, uncomfortable, reverent. Margaret continued, her voice softer now. I built this company because I believed in accountability. And accountability starts here, with me. So, if you believe this company needs someone gentler to lead it forward, I'll accept your vote with grace. She turned to James. But don't mistake my humility for defeat. What I did to protect what others tried to steal from me, my dignity. Then she laid a single sheet of paper on the table. My resignation, if you decide that's what's best. Or, she added, you can let me finish what I started and rebuild this company into something worthy of both respect and redemption. The vote. The board fell silent. The chairman cleared his throat. All in favor of removal? 3 hands rose, James's among them. 4 stayed down. Then, slowly, the young female executive from before raised her voice. Mrs. Thompson, I vote that you stay. Because what this company needs isn't another image, it's integrity. A murmur of agreement followed. One by one, more hands stayed down. When the final tally came in, the decision was clear. Margaret remained CEO, by a narrow margin. The aftermath. As the meeting adjourned, James stormed out, muttering under his breath. Patricia followed, her face unreadable. Margaret gathered her papers quietly. Jade whispered, You did it. Margaret shook her head gently. No. We did something better. We changed what winning looks like. The reconciliation. That evening, back home, she found a text waiting for her. From Bradley. I saw the meeting. I'm proud of you, Mom. Sophia said she meant what she told you in the garden. We want you to be part of the baby's life, if you'll have us. For the first time in weeks, Margaret let herself cry. Quietly. Freely. She typed back. Tell her I'll bring the first storybook. The closing image. Night fell over Chicago. Margaret stood at her window, the city lights blinking like heartbeats. In her reflection, she saw not the avenger, not the victim, not even the CEO. Just a woman who had finally learned that justice without forgiveness is hollow, and that sometimes redemption is the real revenge. She smiled softly to herself. Tomorrow, she whispered, we start again. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. Stories like this remind us that dignity, resilience, and quiet strength often speak louder than revenge ever could. If this story moved you, if it made you pause, reflect, or see yourself in Margaret's journey, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about courage, consequences, and redemption. Your support helps us tell stories that matter. And remember, sometimes the strongest response isn't anger. It's becoming unbreakable.